A newly released affidavit is shedding a little light on the man allegedly behind the fire last weekend at the Pennsylvania governor's residence.
According to that affidavit, the suspect, 38-year-old Harrisburg resident Cody Balmer, placed a call to Dauphin County 911 after the attack, identifying himself by name and railing against Governor Josh Shapiro's views on the war in Gaza. Now, Balmer told 911 operator that Shapiro needs to know that he, Balmer, will not take part in his plans for what Shapiro wants to do to the Palestinian people. Balmer continued saying Shapiro needs to stop having his friends killed and said, quote, "Our people have been put through too much by that monster." Police also said Balmer indicated that he planned to beat Governor Shapiro with a small sledgehammer if he encountered him while setting the fire.
The revelations from the affidavit come alongside a report from CNN detailing how in the days before Balmer allegedly set fire to the governor's mansion, people close to him said he was acting erratically, chewing on batteries and disappearing. The report says his family repeatedly called police and mental health agencies to get him help. But Balmer's ex-girlfriend told CNN that those officials all gave the same answer, that he didn't meet the standards for involuntary commitment and that there was nothing they could do. Balmer, however, denied suffering from any mental illness in court earlier this week.
So he has articulated a very clearly political motivation in setting fire to Josh Shapiro's residence. Thankfully, no one was harmed in this attack. However, the residence was extremely damaged. If you've seen those photos, the fire was
burnt.
Very bad. He brought cans full of gasoline and caused quite a conflagration. And he said that is because of Shapiro's views on what Israel and Gaza is doing, opposed to the Israeli efforts against Hamas in Palestine that have produced a lot of civilian deaths. And so that is a pretty clearly described political motivation. At the same time, people have described him as crazy, eating batteries, etc.
Sure.
So what do you make of it?
I make a couple of things of it. Firstly, it is self-evidently wrong to carry out a political attack or any other form of arson, and it would have been bad enough had it only been Governor Shapiro and his family. The police reports are that there were about 20 or 25 people, because obviously you have staff in the governor's mansion and all of that. There were a lot of lives put in danger by this. Thankfully, loss of life was prevented by a quick response. I do think it is important for those of us, like myself, who have been very critical of the Israeli response in Gaza and American support for that response, to be very clear-cut in condemning that kind of action. It's wrong, and it's wrong, period. I think the reason, or one reason it is important, is that sometimes people who do feel a sympathy for the Palestinian cause can get into moral equivocation about things that are obviously wrong. Look, when it comes to what has happened in Gaza over the past now, a year and a half, I think it is a moral disgrace. And I think that American administrations under former President Biden and under President Trump have backed the wholesale slaughter of people, the denial of food and medicine, bombing of hospitals. I think President Biden and people around him who would profess their concern for human rights will bear a moral stain for that for a very long time, as they should. I think that Trump has endorsed what is effectively ethnic cleansing. I think that is appalling. So all of those things are gruesome and terrible. That obviously does not provide justification for arson attacks on anybody.
Yeah, I similarly am not in total support whatsoever of the Israel policy in Gaza. My views on foreign policy, which are well known to our viewers at this point, because we've had to discuss the subject at great length, is that I think it is a very complicated situation that is not the U.S.'s business, really, or that we don't have much power to impact one way or the other, and we should try to be as uninvolved in the Middle East as possible. And I would not give aid to Israel to help them perpetrate this. I wouldn't give aid to most other nations on earth, independent of what they're doing. That's right. Now, I also really wouldn't tell them what their business is. If they have determined that undertaking this operation to dismantle the terrorist organization on their borders is necessary, I'm not going to advocate the U.S. interfering in that, but we don't have to be culpable in it or funding it, is my basic view of the conflict. With this attack on Shapiro specifically, I do think, I am not going to make this argument. I think there's way too much casual conflation with rhetoric and actual violence. Crazy people, I've said this before, will adopt seemingly political rhetoric.
Right.
It doesn't mean they're actually motivated or inspired by political methods. I think that point is often ignored when the perpetrator can be described as some kind of right-wing lunatic, where then we get a whole lecture about how Fox News and gun culture and everything else conservatives have ever done is why, let's say it was some white supremacist type person who attacked Josh Shapiro. We'd be hearing about how it's Tucker Carlson's fault and it's everybody's fault. Here, this is a left-wing crazy person or a crazy person with left-wing motivations doing this, and I'm not hearing much of that from the media so far, nor do I think it's appropriate to do so, to be clear. I would be saying, well, that's a little silly, but I think that focus is very selectively applied by our mainstream media class.
So to actually sort of, in a way, endorse that view, isn't Sarah Palin at the moment, hasn't she reinvigorated her libel case or defamation case against the New York Times, which dates back to the Gabby Gifford shooting? And whether she would, now that seemed clearly a deranged person who did that rather than somebody who was really motivated by ideological beliefs. But
let alone specifically motivated by Sarah Palin's campaign having put blast targets on districts, which is insane.
Absolutely. Before we wrap this up, Robby, I actually just wanted to inquire about your opinion about something that relates to this case and that I genuinely struggle with, which is, in this guy's case, there's the argument that his family wanted him involuntarily.
Oh yes, I very much wanted to discuss this before we moved on.
And I'm always curious about this because I struggle with what the state or government should be empowered to do if someone is judged by many people close to them to be mentally ill, but they themselves won't submit to treatment. I think that's a genuinely difficult question.
Oh, it is genuinely difficult a question. I think we have clearly drawn the line too far in the direction of preventing treatment of actually insane people. Here you have, nothing makes me crazier than hearing that, why did nobody said anything or knew anything. That is BS every time. There are so many cases now we have of mass shootings or crazy people doing things where, yes, their family spoke up. And law enforcement was notified. Mental health professionals were notified, but nothing got done. Sometimes because of carelessness on the part of the authorities. The Parkland shooter was referred to every law enforcement center you could possibly imagine, and nothing was done. It's infuriating. But in this case, they said, and maybe they're right based on the status of the law, he doesn't meet the standards and there's nothing we can do, even though he's, according to them, was chewing on batteries and doing other crazy... Look, I think you should be able to involuntarily commit someone on that basis. I would, as a libertarian, I would have previously, before I lived in a city and had more regular exposure to crazy people on the streets, I would have said, well, but can we really, trust giving the government the power to say you're crazy so we can lock you up? Now, having interacted with crazy people on the streets more, I see that it is not. It's not blurry. It's not unclear whether they're suffering from some kind of mental delusion. It's not the same as saying, well, people could say I'm crazy because I have kooky views. No, these are people who are writhing in the street, who are unclean. It is so easy to identify that they need medical intervention. They need antipsychotic medication. Is what they need. And when they have antipsychotic medication, they're more stable.
I think that is true. It is highly unusual for me to be slightly more libertarian than you on anything. The question that I often come back to is, if you allow people to be involuntarily committed, how do they get out again? I think there is a question there. If you deprive someone of liberty because they're clearly crazy, which does happen, at what point do we decide they're mentally ill but not quite clearly enough crazy to give them back their liberty? And I think that's a difficult question.
Well, and this is a similar problem with people who suffer horrible drug addiction. You can get them on programs. You can, but it's very hard to quit addictions. It's very hard to, if these people, they take antipsychotic medicine, they are much better. They are stable again, but then they get off it, then they relapse into, sometimes it overlaps with drug abuse behavior, so scrambles your brain that there's nothing you can do for them. It's a difficult problem. I'm not saying no, lock up everyone immediately, but I think when I was younger, the novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest had a lot of impact on me and my thinking about mentally ill people. That novel really did, I think, inspire a generation to be much more skeptical of mental health treatment and say we're criminalizing uniqueness and individuality, which really appealed to me as a young budding libertarian. But now I see reality in this case a little bit different.
Yes, absolutely.
Still ahead on Rising, new revelations from the Trump administration after Kilmar Abrego Garcia was mistakenly deported to a Salvadorian mega prison. We will discuss the latest. More Rising right after this.